Welcome to DEED's Workforce Center webinar training.
So we're going to talk about flowchart.
And this flowchart may not represent all the different things that could possibly happen. We are focusing on the questionnaire, and there are going to be times when the questionnaire may not be used simply because the veteran refuses to fill the questionnaire out. And so we've got the no's there for that, and to show you what course to take when that happens.
Basically what Gary's saying is review it. It's just a path. If you have questions, this flowchart will help you through that if it's hard to figure out in the beginning. This is the part when it comes into the referral process, and what do you do from the very beginning when a vet walks in that door?
This is probably going on in the majority of your workforce centers. You greet people as they come in. You ask them if they've served in the military. If they have, you give them a questionnaire, and then you make appropriate referrals. The big change in this is that now, in addition to referring to a DVOP if they have significant barriers to employment, is you're also going to be making referrals to other staff, to that significant or intensive services provider. This is kind of a triage process. We don't want to give military members a DVOP's business card and send them away. We don't want to refer a military member to a different workforce center, maybe where there's a DVOP. We don't want to ask a military member to come back on a different day to see the DVOP. We want to make sure that they get those services right away. We have kind of gotten away from the use of the word veteran in our program because, as an example, a lot of women who served in the military don't consider themselves veterans because maybe they didn't serve in a combat zone. People who were stateside of both sexes that didn't ever deploy may not consider themselves to be a veteran. So when we use the term military member, we've been getting a better response. If that customer has served in the military, then we want to make sure they get that questionnaire. And there may be some that don't want to fill out the questionnaire, and at that point it's time to kind of explain why we're using the questionnaire. And we're trying to get them to the most effective, most efficient resources possible. And part of the process is to identify if they've got significant barriers to employment. You know, you can certainly refer to the closest DVOP if a veteran, if you suspect they're having issues. The other resource that we're going to talk about in a minute is county veteran service officers. Every county, all 87 counties in Minnesota, have at least one county veteran service officer. And if things are critical with a veteran, that's always a good call to make. And again, we'll cover that in just a few minutes.
So let's just go through a couple of scenarios. So first of all, there is a DVOP there at the Workforce Center. It's been determined that the veteran is eligible and that he should be referred to a veteran, a DVOP. What do they do from that point on? Do they call the DVOP and they make an appointment, give them a business card? What's the process?
Ideally, you'd want to call the DVOP, leave a message, let the DVOP know there is a veteran here who has been identified with a significant barrier to employment. If they're not immediately available because they're out to lunch or they are working with another veteran, we encourage you to be prepared to begin that process of what a universal customer should know about the Workforce Center. Make them feel like they are being served and not going to be put on a bench somewhere when they have to wait. So we're encouraging you to really, I think one of the best things to do is to make them aware of the features in MinnesotaWorks.net and make them aware of what they can do in setting up their account, and then to maybe even just be browsing MinnesotaWorks.net while they're waiting for that DVOP to be free.
So, some of you, or most of you, are probably aware that when veterans post their resume on MinnesotaWorks.net, they can identify themselves as a veteran. And so when employers go in to look for candidates on MinnesotaWorks.net, they can identify the veterans. On the other side of this, businesses who want to hire veterans can identify their jobs, individual jobs, as veteran-friendly. And so when veterans go into MinnesotaWorks.net, or military members, they can look for jobs that are veteran-friendly. So it's something that we always try to make a point of when we're talking to veterans about the resource room in MinnesotaWorks.net, is there's kind of this two-sided process, not only to identify who the veterans are in our resume database for employers so they can be easily found, but also the fact that many companies, and we get calls every day that are looking to hire veterans, they can identify those jobs as military-friendly jobs, and that's where veterans go first when they're in Minnesota Works, is they look for those military-friendly jobs.
Yeah, that's actually great. Now, I just want to summarize this up. So, if somebody has been identified to be referred to a DVOP, let me contact them to see if they're available, and also then get you a card. So if that person's available, you get them on the phone and say, yeah, hey, they can send them down, I'll be with them in a minute. But if they're not available, at that point you say, I made a contact, they're unavailable, here's their card. Meantime, use our services, the Minnesota Works. Now the other one would be, so a DVOP is not available at the Workforce Center. Now they need to be referred to an intensive service provider. Same scenario, that person's been designated, so it's the same procedure. You just contact that person, give them the card, find out if they're available. So a few people commented and said, well, what is availability? What does that mean? Today, tomorrow, next week? Available is right now. I'm going to call to see if that person's available right now.
But initially, we have to make sure that those veterans or those military members with significant barriers are getting services when they present at the Workforce Center. And if it's appropriate to do a handoff later, that's great, but there are several Workforce Centers in Minnesota that just don't have a DVOP assigned. We've got 35 staff, we've got 48 Workforce Centers. We try to do the best we can as far as coverage goes, but there are places where DVOPs do not have scheduled time in a Workforce Center.
Okay, good. So we have a couple of comments referring to the Workforce One. Now, that's not the responsibility of resource area staff to enter that information in Workforce One.
No, that's why they're referred to an intensive services provider. The idea is that the majority of vets that come into your Workforce Centers aren't going to need intensive services, even though they may tell you they want to see a vet's employment rep. When you run them through that questionnaire, there are going to be no yes answers on that, and that's an indication to send them to universal services. I think the main concept to remember is veterans with significant barriers to employment need to see a DVOP or an intensive services provider, and in the case of an intensive services provider, they would follow a lot of the same pathways that your customers do, and actually may have a lot of the same needs. When you look at this list of intensive service, or rather barriers to employment, they include, in fact the questions are, you have a service-connected disability of 10% or more. So one of the categories is disabled veterans. Any veteran that has a disability that's connected to their service should be referred to a DVOP or an intensive services provider. Have you separated from the military in the past 3 years and have been employed for 27 consecutive weeks? Now, dislocated worker counselors will recognize that as the definition of long-term unemployed. So that's another category of veteran that would be referred to a DVOP or to an intensive services provider. Are you experiencing housing difficulties? All programs have people that are homeless or have housing difficulties, but it's another group that DOL has identified as having a significant barrier to employment if you don't have a steady place to stay, if you don't have steady housing. Have you been released from incarceration in the past 12 months? Again, a barrier to employment, whether you're a veteran or not. And so DOL has decided that that is another one of those significant barriers to employment, and that we need to set them up with intensive services, be it through a DVOP or an intensive services provider. Do you lack a high school diploma or a GED? For many, many years, you can't even get into the military without a GED or a diploma, so we're probably talking about older veterans when we talk about that category. But again, if you don't have a high school diploma or a GED, they're not unlike any other customer that you have that lacks that same credential. The next one has to do with low income. Are you or your immediate family that you live with currently receiving public assistance? And to help with this, we've put a chart on the back for lower income levels. And we've got a metro level, and we've got a non-metro level, and then we even listed what's considered a metro county. So you know how to use that chart when you're looking at that particular category. Number 7 is, are you between the ages of 18 and 24? If you are, DOL has decided that's a significant barrier to employment, and we also are required to provide intensive services to them. The next one is, are you transitioning from the military and participate in a transition assistance program and been identified in need of intensive services? That one, admittedly, is a little hazy. It was something that was added at the end, but the big part of that question is, have you been released from the military in the last 3 years, and did you attend a TAP session? Now, the veterans that are answering these questionnaires are going to know what TAP is, and it's basically a job search workshop, financial planning. It covers a lot of different ground, but it's for transitioning service members. The next one is, have you been wounded? Are you ill or injured and receiving treatment in a military treatment facility or warrior transition unit? Again, veterans are going to know this. Military members that are coming out are going to know this. And if they answer yes, they too have been identified as people who need intensive services. And finally, there's a category for spouses. Are you the spouse or other family caregiver of a wounded, ill, or injured veteran? And again, folks that meet that definition are going to know it, and they're going to answer that question as yes, and we need to set them up for intensive services. There's also a note at the bottom of this. It says, do you need a copy of your DD-214? DD-214 is Department of Defense Form 214, and it's your discharge paper. And many veterans need this when applying for a variety of benefits. They need their DD-214. As I mentioned before, we don't require them to produce that when they're seeking services in a workforce center, but if they go to the VA, if they go to a county veteran service officer, if they go to talk to a lot of different people, educational benefits, they need to provide a DD-214. So we've got that question there, and then on the back of the form there's a resource that you can hand them that will help them get that DD-214. It's a process where they have to call somebody and make an application for it. So that kind of covers the questionnaire. I think Gary was going to do that, but I jumped in. But I wanted to make sure that people were really clear about what these significant barriers to employment are. They are a lot of things that our civilian customers experience also.
A couple of things, because it seems like there's a lot of comments still coming in with the workforce one. That's something where resource area staff don't need to be concerned with. That is something that the veteran, the DBOP, or the intensive service person will handle. The other thing, a part of this form is, you're going to see that bottom section that Jim talked about. That is the part where you're going to enter in, if you referred them, who did you refer them to? Put your initials on there and the date. Then you give them that form, or that form will be given to the DBOP.
Actually, that form, we suggest that you file those forms. The ones that have a positive answer to this, and we've set this up so any yes answer on this indicates a significant barrier to employment. So you don't even have to read through all these questions as a resource room or front desk staff person. You see a yes on this, then you go down that path of referring for intensive services, whether it is to a DBOP or to your designated intensive services provider.
So now you have this form, what do I do with it? All the military members that are not referred to a DBOP or intensive service provider, suggesting that you keep a file of the ones who were not referred to. So, for example, military members that you served that were not referred. So it's just really good data to have. The WIBs like it, so we just wanted to say something about that. So this last one is the Staff Instructions Minnesota Veterans Questionnaire. Did you want to say something about that, Gary?
The main thing on this, make sure that you state to the veteran that this is a voluntary thing for them to fill out the questionnaire, that it will be kept confidential, that refusal to provide it will not subject the applicant or participant to any adverse treatment, and that it will be used only in accordance with the law. So that is a DOL requirement. just make sure that you are aware of those staff instructions on the back of the form.
And we have a question. What does the SBE or the non-SBE acronym stand for?
Yeah, SBE is Significant Barrier to Employment, and those are listed on that questionnaire. And in fact, it's at the bottom of that flow chart. SBE is defined Significant Barrier to Employment, and again, it includes all those things on the questionnaire. So if you get a yes to any question on that questionnaire, that indicates a significant barrier to employment or somebody that we need to refer to intensive services.
So we're going to talk about incorrectly handling those forms or the questionnaires. So these are based on past experience that vets have been referred when they shouldn't have. So for example would be, you keep a stack of questions and you give them to a vet's rep without screening them. Nothing is documented on the questionnaire stating service or referral provided in the box. The questionnaire was modified, and then the screener name or the date was omitted in that little comment section. Again, just to initial and date it. The military member was not screened properly. In other words, you didn't check to see if there was one yes and you still referred them. Those are examples of incorrectly handling the questionnaires. That's part of the Refocus efforts, is to screen the SBEs and refer only SBEs to vets to veterans reps.
It calls it out specifically in that TEGL 19-13 that DVOPs cannot do that initial assessment. That has to happen at the front desk or by a partner staff, and only those veterans that have specific barriers to employment would be referred to a DVOP or to that designated intensive services provider.
Okay, so the role of the reception and the resource area staff for members that are not eligible. So here, again, you treat them like a universal customer, talk to them about the resource area services, discuss the priority of services, determine where they are in their job searching stage, provide the information on the workshops, provide the military packet, and again, that's something that we're still working on and that will be sent out to you as a master packet. Gary had suggested that you start assembling your own packet, your local resources that are available, the veterans in your area.
Some of the things that I think would be very pertinent to put into that packet, first of all, would be County Veteran Service Officer information. The name of that County Veteran Service Officer, what they do, they provide benefits. Their primary role is to be experts on what benefits are available to veterans. We've got excellently put it on there, job aid. It's not. Basically an aid, a benefits aid for the veteran would probably be a better way of putting that. So that would be one thing. Of course, we have the question, the veterans questionnaire would be part of this packet. The Veterans Workforce Center referral process flow chart, that would be another one. The military member packet, that's what we've talked about. One of the things that we do in the Workforce Center that I'm located at, we have a handout that we give of very frequent links that a veteran would go to that are veteran friendly, and sometimes those websites are actually veteran oriented, so you might want to put together that handout. Actually, we're going to send it out to all workforce centers as a suggestion. Also, information on work opportunity tax credits for veterans. We're putting something together on that. That would be something that I think every workforce center could put together. We're going to give you information on how to order our brochures that we have. We have 2 brochures that are available statewide, and so we'll be giving information on how you can order those and make those available in the packet. Identified non-DVOP intensive service provider. So that could be the name of the individual that would be providing intensive services to the veteran if there is not a DVOP available.
So recapping would be, of course, you identify if that person is a military member, use the flow chart to determine the path of service, provide the DVOP or the non-veterans rep information, the business card, provide universal services and military package to eligible and ineligible status members, ensure military members leave satisfied with the services. And also Part 2 webinar will be scheduled soon as well. And so now we're spending a few minutes on some of the questions that have already been entered in the chat box. So I'm going to start with this last one. If spouses of military members receive priority of service, then should we be asking if customers, if they have served in the military or are a spouse of the military member?
The last question actually on that questionnaire, are you the spouse or family member caregiver of a wounded, ill, or injured veteran? So it's not any spouse of a veteran, and it's only the spouse of family caregiver of a wounded, ill, or injured veteran. Now there is a concept known as other eligible, and those could be spouses of veterans who have died of a service-connected disability. DOL has really no guidance on screening for that, and so I can't offer you any advice on that. What we're trying to address here in the webinar is specifically this refocused roles and responsibilities for DVOPs. If that other eligible, or if that spouse of a veteran that was killed in action does not have a significant barrier to employment, then they wouldn't be eligible for intensive services anyway. So what we're asking everybody to do is really focus on this questionnaire, make sure that you make copies of this verbatim. I'm going to send out to each workforce center 2 of these that have been put in plastic for you to use as front desk aids, so you always have a good clean copy, and there's going to be a space on that for you to enter your local county veteran service officer's phone number, so you have it right there. Now you'll have to identify that, and if you want to find your local county veteran service officer, you can actually do a Google search. That's on the back of the questionnaire.
Okay, another question. What is the effective date? I would guess we will need to pull the cards from the counter as we only give our after screening.
Effective date is yesterday. So I would pull those cards off, because what we don't want is for service members to be coming in just grabbing a card and calling a DVOP. We want to make sure to use this triage process via the questionnaire. Veterans can identify themselves if they're low income. We didn't just leave it with a question, you know, are you low income or on public assistance, because we didn't want that discussion to happen at the front desk. Okay, you say you're low income, what is your income? So that income chart's on the back of that form, and a veteran or a military member can look at that and say, okay, based on my family size, I am or am not low income, and they can circle the appropriate yes or no for that question.
I think we're going to end our session today. I want to thank everyone for attending. Have a great afternoon.